Welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. I think this is our 45th episode. I can't look back because once you're recording in Spreaker Studio, you can't look at your other episodes, but I think this is either 45 or 46. Movie this time, all about Nina, which it appears that I'm in the minority of not liking the movie, which I am not openly a contrarian where I don't go out of my way to dislike what's popular or like what's not popular or anything like that. I mean, for a long time this year, Avengers Infinity War, which is the highest grossing movie of the year so far, not domestically, internationally, domestically it's Black Panther. That was my favorite movie of the year for a long time until 8th Grade came out, which also was critically acclaimed, and I also liked that. That said, this movie, not that great. I actually took notes for a change. I usually don't do that. I just go off the cuff based on what I just watched, which is good, which is, different. So what I have here is some notes. Number one, movie starts out pretty early on. She says that she's doing her stand-up routine, or she's trying out a new routine, and she's talking about how she's basically a walking stereotype. From that point on, I had a problem with the movie because I think acknowledging that you're a stereotype, or the character is a stereotype, doesn't negate the fact that the character is a stereotype. Like, if you acknowledge it, it doesn't make it okay for the character to not branch out past that point, because prior to this moment, we see her as an Amy Schumer type comedian, and then that's basically, and she's hard drinking. She's the stereotype female comedian who's poor and doing all that stuff. But making her but saying I'm basically a walking stereotype doesn't negate the fact that she is a stereotype. So that was a line that they probably should have omitted altogether, because I feel like it would have helped with the movie a little bit. A lot of the movie is extraneous information to neither the A or the B plot. And I'm not entirely sure why it's there. I mean, I have a theory. I don't know how accurate this is, but this movie feels like it was a short film that when they came up with the idea, they were like, let's just extend it out. Sorry. To make it marketable as a feature-length movie, if we just extend it out, we can have it go longer. And that's why the movie is short for a feature film, clocking in at an hour and a half. And a lot of the stuff leading into the third act doesn't quite develop the A plot enough. Where we don't find out what Comedy Prime is. I mean, I'm assuming if you're from LA, you've probably heard of it, if it's really a place that actually exists. You've probably heard of Comedy Prime if you're into that. But me, as a viewer to a wider audience, I don't know what the hell it is. And the movie doesn't explain what it is until you get to the very end of the movie. Because the movie, when they introduce it as a concept, they make it seem like it's a TV show where it's going to be like Last Comic Standing or something like that, or something like that, where it's going to be a reality show type thing, and then that's continued when it's like, oh well, they have a bunch of female comics, they're gonna make them compete against each other to see who can be on the show, and it's like, okay, it's just weird, but it's still who competes to see who can be on, and it's still weird. And then, by the end of how the movie ends, it's like, oh, it's a club she's trying to get into. There's a big club that I've never heard of before, and the movie doesn't ever explain what it is, or why this is a big deal, or anything like that. Why is this club bigger than any of the other big clubs? Especially because she's from New York. It's not like she's from some small Midwest town where it's like they could play off and say, like, oh, she's aspiring to one of these big places. Like, she's from New York. New York is one of the big comedy capitals. There and LA are the two biggest show business capitals, where you can, you don't need to have her travel to the other side of the country to put her into a fish out of water situation, which isn't ever even addressed. I don't understand why they needed to do that either. Besides, there's a lot of things that don't make sense in this movie in terms of that. there's a lot of really weird cuts between scenes. There are two scenes that really stood out. Number one, when she's talking to her mom, it kind of cuts mid-sentence and goes right to an establishing shot of LA. Um, that was one of them, and then there's another one later on when her and Common, who plays this guy named Rafe, are laying on the ground like opposite each other, and their heads are next to each other. And there's a shot that very easily could have been a one shot, or even a panning one shot, but it just cuts between them. Not even not even artistic discretion where it's like they're swapping anytime they switch. It's kind of just indiscriminately. So a lot of it just screams bad direction to me. Because there's nothing going on in that scene that really requires you to do too much. There's no acting. There's acting. There's no movement to the scene. It's just two people talking. And if you're going to have a scene like that, at least film it where there's some rhythm to the cuts, where there's a reason why the cuts are happening the way they are, and not just indiscriminate to cut because we couldn't get it right on the first take. It means that the director has an issue communicating to his cast, is what I'm getting from that scene. And then the weird cut to an establishing shot is just, I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Kate Del Castillo's character, I'm not entirely sure if she is meant to be an accurate portrayal of California progressives, or if it's a parody, and the movie doesn't really do anything to establish one way or the other an answer, because it could go either way. Let me see, where was I? And then, there's a weird scene where she says no, she's not going to go to the, she's not going to go with Kate Del Castillo to the weird group thing, and then she goes anyway, but there's no real, reason why she changes her mind given. Let's see. The comedy bits. They show her stand up throughout the movie. Typically in a movie like this, if you're going to show that would be used to establish what's going to be happening in the next few scenes. Look at the title cards in Clerks. The title cards in Clerks kind of set up what's going to be coming next. If you watch 8th Grade, which is another movie that came out this year that was fantastic, there are scenes like that where she's doing a YouTube show and she's discussing something that is about to become relevant in the next scene. And she's going to be doing the exact opposite or something to contrast. The stand-up routines have no impact on the plot at any point until the very end of the movie, where the fact that she's a comedian, you can omit any scene in a comedy club, basically, which is a weird choice if you're going to have her being a comedian be such a strong point of the movie. The script is awful. There's a lot of really bad dialogue in the movie. The scene of her doing impressions is another thing. It's another example of this is completely out of left field. That's never really explained as to why it needs to be done, because her agent tells her she needs to have impressions ready to go before Comedy Prime, and they don't ever actually explain why she needs the impressions, or why the impressions are important, or what the point of the impressions are. And then she starts workshopping some of the impressions in front of a mirror, and that scene goes on way too long. And then it's almost never talked about again, and she has wigs there that she's doing with some of the characters, and she doesn't use the wigs when she's actually doing the impressions on stage. And then I have this confusion set in about that's not her comedy style. Her comedy style is not a impressionist. She's not a Ralph Garman or a Frank Caliendo or someone like that who's going to be doing impressions. She is an observational comedian. So I don't know why she would want to go somewhere that requires you to do impressions, because that just seems like a weird decision. So that was another thing that they don't really ever explain in the movie. What else have I got? Hang on. Don't really know what Comedy Prime is. The movie doesn't explain what Comedy Prime is. I don't remember if the woman backstage... after one of her shows, she meets a woman backstage. And it's never established if she met the woman before, or if we know who she is from somewhere else. It could have been the mom, but then when they show the mom later on in the movie, after her meltdown on stage, they don't actually show them. They don't have that that moment. Now, we're talking about the meltdown. The meltdown is one of the things that I think is part of why the critical acclaim is, because she goes on stage at Comedy Prime finally after she gets it. Oh, okay, that's another thing I want to talk about. Self-destructive behavior in a character. Self-destructive behavior is something you need to show a pattern of prior to introducing it in the third act and then acting like it's a thing that she's always had. There's no evidence that she's got self-destructive behavior besides the fact that she's drinking. In fact, the movie goes so far as to show that that's not the case of something she's regularly doing, because she's going out and rather than, doing what she usually does and just having one-night stands and drinking heavily, she's getting intimate with one person. So the movie's, it contradicts what the movie's laid out until that point. To have her get self-destructive all of a sudden right after she gets the gig at Comedy Prime. That said, they don't. And then after that, she her weird cop pseudo boyfriend from the beginning of the movie comes to LA, and at the end of the movie, everyone's kind of just coming to LA for some reason, but they don't really explain why. Like Mindy Sterling shows up in LA, and it's just like, okay, why couldn't her mom come, but her next door neighbor did? So then she goes up on stage and has this meltdown talking about how her father raped her for 8 years and how she I don't want to say meltdown, I feel it's diminutive. They say meltdown in the movie. That's why I'm calling it that, because in the movie they call it a meltdown, but it doesn't really feel like a meltdown. The movie would have been better serviced, I think, having that be a pivotal moment between her and Rafe, rather than a pivotal moment of her on stage and doing it publicly like that. For someone who in the movie up until this point has never addressed the fact that her father raped her or that she had a bad relationship with her father besides the fact that he killed himself, it's weird for this to all of a sudden come out in an outburst on stage, I think. I mean, everyone handles grief and everyone handles their abuse and their trauma in their own ways, but I feel like the way the movie handles it would have been better serviced if she had this outburst style, telling her story, speaking her story, if it happened to Rafe as a result of the same confrontation happening. If you have this backstage and then goes out on stage and then crushes the comedy routine, it feels like the movie would have had a more concrete resolution, because the movie doesn't really resolve itself. It just kind of is like, after she does this at Comedy Prime, she goes back to talk to the guy who runs the place and goes, I don't know, we'll see what goes on. And then she gets another booking at the Laugh Factory, which I've actually heard of the Laugh Factory. But it's weird. I don't know. I feel like she could, the movie could have been better. It's a shame because the cast is a very strong cast, with the exception of Common. I'm not entirely sure if he's a good actor or not. And I've seen him in a few things at this point. But yeah, I maybe wait until this movie comes out on DVD to check it out. I don't think I feel like this is another case like Peppermint where the reviews got skewed in one direction politically. I hate saying that because I feel like, I feel like I'm diminishing what the movie is when you say politics are influencing the reviews. But for me, this isn't a movie that I would even consider, after seeing it once, buying again or looking out for it on HBO or something. There's not too much in this movie that's redeeming enough for me to watch it again. Because there's just so much plot, not even inconsistencies or plot holes, but just the plot's kind of shafted for character moments, and character moments are fine, but you need to have a plot too. A plot's the basic, what you need for a movie. You need to have a plot there. And this movie just doesn't have that. And it fails fundamentally at storytelling. But from what I saw in the reviews, it's like she goes out and it shows about survivors speaking about their abuse. So I guess, I don't want to damn the movie over the fact that it doesn't have a plot, but I feel like that's a pretty solid reason that you should damn a movie. But yeah, I don't know. We'll wrap it up there for today. If you're interested in the movie, check it out, make your own opinion about it. But for me, not having a plot, for me, or not having the basic storytelling elements that are necessary for audience to be able to understand what they're watching, that's a pretty big deal for me. And that's where this movie has some fundamental failures for me. So with that, we'll wrap it up for today. The next episode we have is First Man. and then Bad Times at the El Royale. So we'll be back with those Friday and Monday.